Virtue ethics. Virtue ethics. What is virtue ethics? Virtue ethics focuses on how to be a good person, not what is considered right or wrong. It looks at what makes a good person and the qualities/virtues that make them good. Virtue ethics is agent-centered morality. It asks what sort of person ought I to be, rather than how ought I to act. The Greek word for virtue, aret, means excellence, meaning a virtuous person is one that does things excellently all the time. Where does virtue ethics fit in? There are two main branches of ethical theories: deontological and teleological. Many people argue that both are unsatisfactory ethical theories, so they turn to virtue ethics, which is neither deontological or teleological. The problem is that one can follow either route, but it says very little about our inner moral worth or ourselves. Virtue ethics attempts to find a third way in which our duty, however we locate it, is replaced by the kind of character exhibited by the agent, anscom. A father sees his daughter drowning in a river. Naturally he loves her and jumps in to save her. Kantian ethics would not consider his leaping into the water morally good, since it was not done out duty, but love and concern for his daughter. Imagine that at the same time, a heart surgeon falls into the water. The utilitarian ethicist would be forced to rescue the surgeon, since he would bring the greatest good to the greatest number of people. Most people would consider the father a monster should he do that. Even if the utilitarian attempted to shift sides, and say that the daughter should be saved, since parental love will help make the community a better place overall, he is still making parental love a secondary feature to the benefits to the community. Anscombe and others have been unsatisfied with these alternatives. She says that we learn, not being told what to do, whether by the categorical imperative or by the principle of utility, but by learning to develop certain characteristics. Virtue ethics is concerned about educating ourselves to become better people, and so to act in a way that demonstrates the right kinds of feelings and emotions. Plato and Virtue. Plato's moral theory centers around the achievement of man's highest good. This involves the right improvement of the soul and the well-being of his/her life. Happiness must be attained through pursuing virtues. A good action is one that helps to achieve this. Plato considered certain virtues as central, cardinal virtues, and when these virtues are in balance a person's actions will be good. However, Greek philosophers disagreed on what the cardinal virtues were. Aristotle and Virtue. Aristotle explained that the point of engaging in ethics is to become good, for we are inquiring to become good, since otherwise our inquiry would be of no use. He distinguishes between things which are good for means and things which are good for ends. He sees the one final good as eudaimonia. Aristotle's ethics is known as virtue ethics. This is because central to his description of the good are the virtues which shape human character and behavior. He suggests human flourishing is a life characterized by virtues. However, good human life is one lived in harmony with others, as he saw us as rational and social beings. We live in groups and the well-being of the group is more important than that of a single member. Aristotle distinguished two types of virtues, intellectual and moral virtues. Moral virtue cultivated by habit. To become a generous person, I must get into the habit of being generous. It is not enough to be told that I should be generous, I need to practice generosity. They are courage, temperance, big-heartedness, generosity, high-mindedness, right ambition, patience, truthfulness, wittiness, friendliness, modesty, righteous indignation. Intellectual virtues, qualities of mind developed through instruction. They are practical skill, knowledge, common sense, intuition, wisdom, resourcefulness, understanding, cleverness. Aristotle believed everyone has the potential to develop these moral and intellectual virtues, but few will actually achieve that potential. The golden mean/doctrine of the mean. This is the balance between extremes of virtue and vice. However, the mean isn't the same for everyone and depends on circumstance. You need to apply phronesis, practical wisdom, to decide on the right action in each situation. Phronesis is acquired as we grow up and move away from rules and demands from authority to a more virtue-centered morality. For both excessive and insufficient exercise destroy one's strength, and both eating and drinking too much or too little destroy health, whereas the right quantity produces, increases and preserves it. So it is the same with the other virtues. The man who shuns and fears everything and stands up to nothing becomes a coward. The man who is afraid of nothing at all, but marches up to every danger, becomes foolhardy. Modern Virtue Ethics, Anscombe. Anscombe wrote a paper entitled Modern Moral Philosophy. She was critical of a law conception of ethics where the key focus was obligation and duty. The modern development of virtue ethics is often linked back to this paper. She questioned if there can be moral laws if there's no God. What do right and wrong mean if there is no lawgiver? She suggested the answer was eudaimonia, which isn't dependent on any God. Modern Virtue Ethics, Foote. Foote is a contemporary British philosopher who attempted to modernize Aristotle. She believes that goodness should be seen as the natural flourishing of humans as living beings. Foote argues that ethics shouldn't be about theorizing but about making the world a better place. She was one of the founders of Oxfam. The virtues are beneficial to the individual and the community. Modern Virtue Ethics, MacIntyre. MacIntyre believes ethical theories have just resulted in disagreements. People don't think there are any moral truths and consider each opinion to be as good as the other. He argues that most people's attitudes today are based on emotivism and people now speak and act as though emotivism is true. MacIntyre wants to restore the idea that morality should be seen in terms of purpose, but thought it wouldn't be possible to restore Aristotle's theory, so he attempted to make human function dependent on community. The shared practices of community help cultivate virtues which improve through time. For MacIntyre, the key virtues are any virtues which sustain the households and communities in which men and women seek for good together. He opposes the individualism of today. Modern Virtue Ethics, Nussbaum. Nussbaum interprets Aristotle's virtues as absolutes, claiming that justice, temperance, generosity etc. are essential elements of human flourishing across all societies and throughout time. This juxtaposes the general attitude among modern virtue theorists. Nussbaum is clear that she believes a relativist approach is incompatible with Aristotle's virtue theory. Virtue Ethics and Feminism. Feminist writers claim that men often think of justice and autonomy when looking at morality, which are stereotypically masculine traits, as opposed to women who often think morally in terms of caring, nurturing and self-sacrifice. Bayer believes in a view of ethics that takes into account our natural biases. Applying virtue ethics, euthanasia. Aristotle believed we should aim for eudaimonia. Obviously, people suffering greatly from illness would not achieve eudaimonia. If there was a way to improve their physical well-being, Aristotle would support this. However, where someone is terminally ill, you could argue that they should have the courage to accept their fortune. It is not clear whether the terminally ill person should have the patience to cope with their condition, or the courage to end their own life. Ultimately, the person achieving eudaimonia would have the wisdom and judgment to make their own choice. Strengths of virtue ethics. The golden mean allows for extreme courage in some situations and restraint in others. Each virtue to the right degree depending on the circumstances. When moral virtues are established by habit, human reactions are firm and fixed. Unlike utilitarianism, which is easily undone when a person chooses to be selfish rather than think of the greater good, or Kant's theory, which gives no motivation for doing what's right. There isn't just a single criteria for goodness, like a hedonic calculation or universalization. Virtue ethics has grown and developed, taking on board what we know about human development from many disciplines. It has become broader and wiser over the years. Weaknesses of virtue ethics. There is no way to make laws that talk about courage and patience. Virtues can come into conflict with each other. Sometimes we have to choose to be kind or be honest, but can't be both. Virtue ethics does not tell us which virtues are higher and which we should choose to be. Virtue ethics is criticized for relying too much on the individual, ignoring the authority of biblical rules and church teaching. Thank you for watching. If you want this channel to upload more videos on A-level religious studies, please like this video and subscribe this channel.